say Lene Rachel Andersen, so you are the author of the Nordic Secret, but also other books. Can you explain a little the other book you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, this is my first book in English. The other books were in Danish. So
it was about it's books about what?
I mean, this one is about adult education and Bildung and culturation in Denmark. The other ones have been about technological development. So it's really about the future. This one is about our history, not just Nordic history, but also European history. It has the subtitle, A European Story of Beauty and Freedom. And
so today, this last video, new video, we are going to speak about the future and the future of Bildung in a context where the society is complex, where you have a locality, but also global economy. So can you explain a little your vision of meta-paradigmatic Bildung?
We have education and enculturation, cultural institutions and other institutions for the industrialized society. And that is very much a nation-state society.
Yes.
Now the internet and other technologies are connecting the globe, which means that you must function in the world as a French citizen of the world, and as a European, I must function as a Danish European and citizen of the world. And we do not have the language and the culture for that. We don't have a social imaginary at the European level. I mean, some people do, but it's not widespread throughout neither the French nor the Danish population or any other part of Europe. So the cultural aspect of being a European, we have not put nearly or any resources into that compared to what we did as nation states. I mean, you spent 200 years convincing yourselves about what French culture is like, and everybody in France more or less understands what that means. In Denmark, more or less all the Danes understands what it means to be a Dane, but we have not figured out what does it mean to be European.
Yes,
what
does that mean to be a global citizen?
Right, and so there's a European heritage, and then there's a global heritage, and we need to acquaint ourselves with that. It needs to be part of our meaning making. And in France, you have public schools, you have universities, and you have theaters, and you have newspapers, not least radio, which was 100 years ago the thing that allowed everybody in France to hear the same kind of French being spoken. The rest of Europe as well, everybody gradually lost their dialects because everybody was listening to one version of their own language or their national language. So today we have to figure out how can we do that at the European level where we have different languages. Are we all going to be bilingual, or are we all going to be just meaning making in one language and not becoming able to understand one another around Europe? And we have not, I mean, this is about meaning making. And what we are doing right now, or at least the majority, not just of European people in different European countries, but around the globe, is that we're meaning making in our mother tongue, and the majority of us are really only meaning making in one language. And if we are familiar with literature, art, theater, culture, it's usually, as long as it's in writing, it's in our own language. There's a lot of American movies and TV series, but then they're either subtitled or dubbed into our own language. So we're still meaning making in one language. We have to understand what's going on outside our own language, outside our own country. Otherwise, we cannot become. We cannot have a united Europe, and we cannot have a functioning world. And so we need to upgrade our education, we need to upgrade our meaning making, and we need to upgrade our sense of responsibility, not just towards France or the UK or Denmark, but towards Europe and towards the globe. And when you know how much of an investment that was to our nation states to build public schools and high schools and universities and public libraries and all those things, what will it take at the European level? What will it take at the global level? And I mean, there are places in the world where they don't even have libraries or public schools. So we have to create that, and we have to create the adult education or Bildung institutions that allow us to think beyond our nation states and our first language of meaning making.
Yes, and of course that is seems very, very difficult. Very.
It's easy to say, but it's harder to do.
It is a huge program, but even it is more complex that because of the difference of paradigm of each culture that need not only a new culture, but a new culture of cultures, ability to play between the culture and between the paradigms. So you was explaining me that you are working on some book about this meta-paradigmatic culture. What it is?
Well, it's called meta-modernity, and I think most people would be familiar with post-modernity and modernity. So modernity is science, democracy, equal rights for men and women. There are some universal, or there are some general principles and moral values that go along with modernity. Then you have post-modernity, which has this ironical distance to modernity. It deconstructs everything. You can analyze everything up and down and from any angle, and you can take it apart. Postmodernity has a hard time putting anything together and building lasting structures. But it's a very useful analytical tool. Before modernity, there was the traditional society, or what you could call pre-modernity, which was hierarchical. That's where you had the patriarchy. That's where religion and politics was one and the same thing. So you did not have secular politics, you only had religious politics. I mean, religion was what defined society. And then before that, and this pre-modernity or traditional society emerged with Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and it lasted into the medieval times in Europe, and it was really just with the Renaissance and modernity, the printing press and Renaissance, that we distance ourselves from the pre-modern world and created the modern world. Before the traditional or pre-modern society, there was indigenous society. And that goes back into the evolution of human beings. And before that, so it was typically animistic, it was tribal, it was little groups of maybe 200 individuals in the beginning. And it was hunter-gatherers, but it was also the earliest agriculture. So what we are some cultural theorists that are suggesting with what we call meta-modernity is that the best from all these cultural codes, as they're called, can be integrated into one cultural code or culture of cultures in the future, where there are some things from our indigenous past that goes very well with intimate groups where everybody can have eye contact and where you can read body language, and where your emotions and your mirror neurons can tell you whether I can trust you, whether you're dangerous, whether we're having fun, whether I can joke with you, we can read that. So in small groups, that kind of trust can emerge, and we can have a certain way of being around one another. There's also a circular understanding of the world in indigenous cultures that we desperately need in order for our economy to be sustainable and create sustainable production. So circularity is also a concept of the indigenous culture that we need to learn and handle and appreciate in the times that we're living in. Then from the pre-modern culture, there's a lot of cultural heritage, existential philosophy, symbolic language, religious practice, beliefs, moral norms that are important that we need to bring in as well. And then all the science and democracy and equality from modernity, we need that as well. And then from post-modernity or postmodernism, we need the analytical tools. We need to know that all of this was human-made. We need to understand that it grew out of a context and that there are no absolute truths, but we need to believe in absolute truth in order to be meaning-making and in order to feel that to that sense of sincerity and sense of belonging that you can't deconstruct, otherwise your entire life is deconstructed. So we need to understand all these different ways of looking at the world and integrate them into a culture of cultures. And that is a challenge, because in the modern world, we tend to look down upon religion, and we tend to look down upon indigenous culture because we have science, so we know better. And in the postmodern world, we tend to deconstruct science and deconstruct modernity because it is a more complex way of understanding the world, and we know better. The problem with postmodernity is that it cannot build societies. You cannot build a society on deconstruction. You cannot bring up children on deconstruction. You cannot even understand irony until you're in your teen years. So there are some shortcomings in postmodernity. There's also shortcomings in modernity and in pre-modernity and indigenous culture. So we need all of this awareness of where are the strengths, what is important, and what should we not carry into the future. And this is very complex, and it hasn't been thoroughly explored yet. It's very much at the forefront of cultural theory, and we need to start a conversation about this. This is not going to be just a brainchild of a handful of people. This should be a countrywide, a continental conversation about what is it that's important in our heritage and what is it that we really want to bring with us into the future, and that's part of our meaning making.
Do you see this happens now in the Nordic country?
It's not something that's happening outside a very small group of geeks like myself, nerds who are diving into this, and it is actually a European network of people thinking these thoughts and exploring them. But
actually, you are building a group, a think tank, and do tank around those ideas.
Yeah, we are creating a think tank in Copenhagen called Nordic Bildung, where we're exploring some of these ideas. We're working with people in Sweden and Germany and the UK, and from across Europe. But the active group right now is mainly in Copenhagen.
Great. Thank you very much. So, Lene Rachel Andersen, The Nordic Secret. It is a book about the dynamic of a Nordic country, Sweden, Denmark, Finland,
Norway,
all the country on the north of Europe. Have a good day. Thank you, Lene.